I don't even know how to start a PowerPoint presentation in this thing. This one? Great, thanks.
All right. Hey, Chris, did you want to get us going, or me too, or what? All right. Off you go then, sir. Mouse is yours.
Michael's on the line there.
Okay.
You'll just have to let me know.
You're recording.
Okay. All right, we're going to get started. Welcome tonight here at HKS in Northville. This evening's agenda, we're going to do a brief overview of the TAP group, AIA Detroit TAP group, and then go into our presentations. We got a couple good presentations for you. Just to let you know, we have our future meetings scheduled September 24th at Kafari, and those are the topics we're going to talk about. November 11th at Stantec in Berkeley. We're still trying to hash through some of those presentations, and then next year at Harley Ellis will be on January 13th. So if you can make those, that'd be great. Just wanted to go through the TAP committee, and the AIA TAP group was created a few years back to try and communicate about technology and how it's impacting our practice. The AIA Detroit this year has a new website, and there's the link to it. There are several resources on there, and if we got some time after, I'm going to show you a couple of the new things that we added since our last meeting. And if you need to email us at any time, there's our email address, aiadetroittap@gmail.com. And we're doing this in conjunction with the Detroit Area BIM User Group, and there's a little history about that. We're going on our 10th year next year. And, you know, it's been a loose-knit group of people that just want to share ideas and keep pushing the limits about technology. So with that, we're going to go into our first presentation, Revit automation. And I actually got in contact with Michael through a blog, ArchSmarter blog, and asked him to present, because in all the years that I've been attending, I don't remember really a presentation on macros, and it's a button in Revit that I never use myself. So I thought it'd be great. And Michael is phoning in from us for us today, and we'll be giving our presentation on Revit automation. So with that, I will hand it over to Michael as soon as Dustin tells me what I need to do.
And then I think you can right click that number. Actually, he's probably already presented. Michael, can you take control of the sharing?
I can hear you just a little.
Negative.
No, can't hear me.
And you guys speak up, right? You can barely hear.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
That's a little better. Can you go to louder?
Okay. Let's see. Now, how about my screen? Can you see?
No, unfortunately, we're not seeing a screen yet.
Hold on a second.
Oh, it's video conferencing. Can you turn on video conferencing or something?
Let's see.
First, why don't you stop sharing the screen for a second? Maybe that needs to happen before we can.
Okay. So it's. Oh, now we're starting Sheen.
Okay, there we go.
So this is our first time doing a remote presenter, so thanks for sitting through that.
Okay. So now just last check. Can you hear me okay? And
Yeah, you're great. You're presenting. You're good to go, sir.
sorry, I couldn't hear it. But
What? You're good to go.
I'm good to go. Okay, great. Well, thanks again for the invitation, and I'm actually a topic that I'm very passionate about. So what I'm going to do is just give you an overview of Automate Revit, and then I'll talk a little bit
Coming out, I don't know.
using macros. So let's get started. So like Chris and I'm a principal at Space Command, which is an Chris mentioned. I also run a website called ArchSmarter.
Can we not
And
switch it?
what led me was, this reality that projects, building types, the books and the code growing exponentially. It's not enough. As far as we have to start doing that. Yep.
Hold on a second.
Okay. I can try dialing in if you.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay. Let's pause for let's see.
You're talking through the little projector here. It's not really working. Well, no, because it's coming technically through the computer. Like if you look at audio. No, it's one port. It's all device. I don't think that's going to help. Yeah, there you go. Use telephone. Hey. Sure.
Can you guys hear me okay? Can you guys hear me okay? Sorry about that. I tried dialing in and I wasn't able to connect. How are you guys doing on that end? Are you still there? I've lost audio on your end. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I can't hear actually in the room. if in the room, if you could just in the chat, let me know, and then I'll just keep going.
Hello?
Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Is this Michael?
Is the audio okay? Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, the phone in the room doesn't, not connecting for some reason. So, we can either try to go back through the speaker on the phone, or I can try my, yeah, my phone sucks. But okay, anyways, I'm going to put you on speakerphone here, and
Okay.
hopefully we can all hear you. But hold on a second. You did this before last year. Hello?
Hi.
Oh, man. Yeah. Hey, Michael, you want to talk for a little bit?
Do you want me to back up?
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, sure. No problem. It just
If anyone else wants to dial on their phone, they can do it.
You need to start, and I'll kick it off again. Technology is great when it works.
Yeah, nightmare when it doesn't. Michael, you ready?
I'm ready. Yep. You guys good?
Whenever you want. We're gonna do some stuff in the background, but I think we go. You got a decent audio for it.
I'll just run through. Yeah, just stop me if you can't hear or anything like that. All right. So let's do take 2. So once again, my name is Michael Kilkelly, like Kurt said, and I'm a principal at Space Command, which is an architecture and design firm in Middletown, Connecticut. And I also run a website called ArchSmarter.com, where I write about productivity technology with the goal to help architects and designers work smarter, not harder. So what drove me to start ArchSmarter is that the reality is project schedules are getting shorter and shorter, and building types are getting more complicated. The number of pages in the code books are growing exponentially, so it's not just enough to work harder. There's only so many hours in the day, and as far as I know, no one's figured out how to make more hours yet. And if they did, they'd be a millionaire. So we have to start working smarter. We have to truly master our tools and processes. And getting under the hood of your software and really understanding how it works is the best way to ensure that you remain competitive in the workplace and that your firm is competitive in the marketplace. So this is a perfect time to learn how to program Revit. The tools are a lot more accessible. The software is mature. The rate of development from Autodesk is slowing, so they're only making incremental changes from version to version. And if you want the software to do something specific to make it work the way you work, most likely you're going to need to do it yourself. So let me tell you a little bit about me and my story. I'm an architect. I don't have a background in computer science. I took an intro to programming class when I was in grad school, and I had to drop it. It was just way too hard. I was spending anywhere from 30 to 40 hours a week on the problem set. Now, part of it was a lack of context. The exercises were really abstract, and I couldn't relate them to what I was doing. They weren't necessarily about solving my problems, and I knew I wanted to be an architect. I didn't want to be a programmer. So several years later, I was working in LA, and I was the new guy in the office. So at the end of a project phase, I was the one who had to package up all the drawings and get them ready to send out to consultants and the contractor. So needless to say, this required me spending a lot of time doing tedious, mind-numbing tasks like file renaming, cleaning up files, and moving stuff around. So the low point came on a Friday after I'd already put in a 60-hour week working on a deadline. We got all the drawings finished at 7 o'clock, and so while everyone else went out to get a drink and celebrate finishing the deadline, I had to stay cleaned up and ready to ship out. So I had to go through all the sheets, delete unused elements, delete layers, clean and purge the drawings. Then once they were clean, I had to bind them all out. So pretty standard AutoCAD stuff, but the drawings were big and they were complicated, and it took me almost an hour to do each one. Now the turning point came after working all week and putting in a full day already. I had to spend another 8 hours cleaning up the drawings and sending them out. And I realized at this point, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, my head's pounding and my eyes are red from staring at the monitor, that I needed to find a better way to do this if I wanted to stay sane. It's not that the work was difficult, but it just took time. And since I wasn't getting paid overtime, it was time I'd rather be spending doing other things like sleeping or drinking beer. So also when I'm that tired, I make a lot of careless mistakes. What should take an hour was taking me 2 hours because I'm making mistakes as I go. At that point, I committed myself to learning to program because I wanted to automate this process so I didn't need to stay up late every time we had a deadline. I had a definitive objective. I outlined the process and I set out to write a macro for each step. And then I ordered a bunch of books and I Googled like crazy. Now the high point came after spending a couple weeks writing and testing the macros. I was able to reduce the time required to clean up the files from 8 hours down to 1 hour. And what was better is that since I had externalized the process, I could direct people to run the macros. I didn't necessarily need to be involved. So the best part was at our final deadline, I had 8 people running the macros. They basically, did all the work because it was very well described, and I was the first person to the bar that day. So for me, learning to program directly improved my quality of life since I wasn't staying up late doing a lot of these tedious tasks, and it helped me produce better results. So in the end, everybody was happy. Now that you've heard firsthand the benefits of learning the program, let's talk about automation as it applies to Revit. There are 3 main ways that you can automate tasks in Revit. There's Dynamo, macros, and add-ins. And I'm going to go through these briefly. Dynamo is kind of the new kid on the block. It's a visual programming environment. It's an open source project that Autodesk has run, and it's available as a free download from dynamobim.org. The way it works is that you connect code blocks called nodes to visually construct your program, or graph as it's called in Dynamo. It's very similar to Grasshopper, which was developed for Rhino software. So Dynamo is kind of the kid brother of Grasshopper. One of the benefits to Dynamo is you don't really know how to program. You don't need to know how to program in order to create graphs, since you're just connecting nodes. Now, on the downside, and if you look at this is a fairly simple node, but they can get really complicated fast, and you have essentially all these node boxes here that are connected with all these squiggly lines. So it takes a little bit of work to figure out what's going on in the graph. Another downside with Dynamo is that you can't create an interface for the graph. If you want to run it, you have to open up Dynamo and then run it directly. What that means is that anyone who wants to use the graph, they need to have Dynamo installed, and they actually have to know how to use it. And Dynamo graphs aren't compiled, which means they aren't compiled into kind of a runtime language. And that means that they tend to run slower than some of the other methods that I'll talk about in a minute. And Dynamo is still evolving, so it's not fully mature yet. If you've gone to AU the last couple of years, or you go to the RTC conference, there's a lot of emphasis on Dynamo because it's kind of the new technology, and it can do some really cool stuff. But it is maturing. And so there are things that I can do with macro, for example, that you can't do with Dynamo without doing a little bit of programming. And I think that gap is going to narrow over time. Now, the next method is Revit macros. Macros are written in code using Sharp Develop, which is Revit's built-in programming environment. Macros are actually embedded in RVT files. They're not saved as an external file. And this is both bad and good. Macros are compiled to a runtime language, so they run fast, and you can also create dialog boxes, so you can make them very user-friendly for non-programmers to use. To run a macro, you use the Macro Manager dialog in the Manage ribbon. So you go up to Manage, click on that, and then at the very far right-hand side, like Chris said, you may never have used it, you click on Macro Manager, and it opens up this dialog box. And this dialog box will show you any of the files that you currently have open that have macros. Once the file is open, you can run that macro on any of the other files that you have open. Now, what that means, though, and this is one of the downsides of macros, that in order to run the macro, you have to open the file containing the macro. And so, especially if you're working in an office environment where you have a number of people working in Revit, if they want to use any of the code that's in the macro, you have to open the macro file. So it's not convenient in that sense like an add-in, which I'll talk about in a second. Now, personally, macros are my automation method of choice, so I'm going to talk about them a bit more later in the presentation. Now, the last automation method is add-ins. Just grab a quick drink. Now, add-ins are a more powerful version of macros. They're written in code, just like macros, and they're compiled. Now, to create an add-in, you actually use an external programming environment, which is like Microsoft Visual Studio, and this is what I'm showing here on the screen. Add-ins use the same code, as I said, but there's a little more overhead required to create the add-in, since you need to connect the code directly to Revit. So you can pretty much write a macro and then convert that to an add-in, but there's a couple extra steps that you need to do in order to get the add-in code to actually find Revit and be able to make the connection between the two. Now, add-ins need to be installed on the local computer, and they're accessed using the add-ins ribbon, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Since they're installed and they're not embedded in an RVT file like a macro, they're easy to distribute in an office environment. And you have a lot of flexibility when creating add-ins regards to the interface and how the add-in appears on the ribbon. You can also create your own ribbon item here, and then there's a number of options that you have for drop downs and other things to make accessible all the aspects of the add-in. You can also make what's called an external tool, which is essentially an add-in, but it doesn't have it doesn't have its own icon, and it's limited in terms of what the interface used to launch it. But essentially, they're coming from the same place, and they're persistent across all the RVT files that you have open in your session of Revit. Now, with that flexibility, comes a lot more complications. So it's really another jump in terms of the level of skill you need, and the more you need to kind of delve into the obscurities of computer programming. Now, sorry about that. All three automation methods make use of the Revit API. The API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's the API that exposes Revit's functionality to the outside, and it allows coders and developers to extend the capabilities of the software. The API is not static, so it evolves over time as more and more functionality is exposed by the Revit developers. Each new release of Revit typically brings changes and updates to the API. Now, for the rest of my presentation, I'm going to take a deeper look at Revit macros. Again, that's because that's my automation of choice, but also they give you the power of the add-in, but they're easier to get up and running. Before you can start writing macros, you want to first download the Revit Software Development Kit, or SDK. The SDK is an installer that Autodesk puts out, and it contains a lot of useful information, such as the API help file and some macro sample files. You download the SDK from the Autodesk website, and I found that the URL for the download changes from time to time, so the easiest way to find it is to simply do a Google search for Revit 2016 SDK. And once you install it, let me show you what it looks like. So here's in my C drive, and you can see I have a bunch of SDK folders here. So if I go into the 2015 SDK, let's pull that out. So this is what gets installed as part of that. Again, the main things you want to look at are the macro samples file, and this contains a couple of RVT files that have a whole bunch of standard macros that you can take a look at. And most importantly is the Revit API help file. And we'll talk about that in a second. So again, the help file is the most important part of the SDK, and it essentially outlines the entire API. It's organized by namespaces, and a namespace is essentially a hierarchical container for identifiers within the API. And one way that I think about namespaces is it's like folders in a computer's directory. So each folder at the same level of directory needs a unique name. Folders can contain similar files and subfolders, but the path to each file will be unique. So namespaces essentially work the same way. And for instance, many objects in the API have a geometry property. So things like walls have a geometry property, doors, windows, and so on. So if I want to reference the geometry of a wall, I do that through the autodesk.revit.db.wall.geometry namespace. Now, that's a lot to remember, but essentially that gets me all of the properties and methods within the wall's geometry. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that reading the help file isn't easy. It's not written like a narrative. It's just a description of all the elements in the API, and there's a lot of elements. And it takes some time to get comfortable and familiar with the API. There are some code samples in the help file, which are really useful, but essentially the help file is like a roadmap. And a roadmap's not going to teach you how to drive, but it'll show you how to get where you're going if you know how to read it. And that was one of the challenges when I first started programming in Revit, was trying to figure out the help file. And what I did at first is I started just Googling, like if I wanted to change the height of a wall, or if I wanted to make a sheet or something like that, I would just start by Googling that, and I would find code samples. And then eventually I would start saying, well, I should start looking at the API help file and see what's in there, if there's anything I can find out. And it took me a few months of doing that. And at this point now, I'm very comfortable, and I know where things are, and I know how it's organized. I can just go directly to the help file itself, to the source. So I find that I actually Google for specific things a lot less, and I can go right into the help file itself. But again, that took me a few months, if not longer, to get comfortable doing it. So again, it can be a little bit intimidating at first, but if you work through it, you figure out exactly how to find stuff in there. A couple other things about macros. You can write a macro in any of the 4 languages. You can do C#, VB.NET, Python, and Ruby. Now, there's a lot of pros and cons to each language. C# and VB.NET are the most popular, and there's a lot of code samples available on the internet in these languages. Personally, I found that VB.NET's a lot easier to learn for beginner programmers, so that's the language that I use. I've tried using Python, but I found that its implementation within Sharp Develop leaves a lot to be desired, and I would take code that worked fine in VB.NET, and I would rewrite it in Python, and there were some macros I just couldn't get to work. It just, for whatever reason, that part of the API wasn't implemented in Python. So it was a little bit frustrating. Python's a lot sort of more exciting of a language, I guess. It's getting used a lot more and more, so I was really explore that part of it, but I couldn't get it to work. So for me, it's VB.NET. What I thought we'd do is I'm going to switch over to Revit, and I'll show you how to write a couple simple macros. And then what I'll do is I'll go through some of the macros I've created for ArchSmarter, which you can download from the website for free. So let me switch over here to Revit. And I'm going to create a new project file. And it doesn't really matter what, I'm just going to use an architectural template. You can see I have a macro template here, but any template will work. There's no difference, really. And like I said before, to access the macro manager, I'm going to go up to the Manage ribbon, and then I'm going to go to the macro manager on the far right. And I have a bunch of macros open already, but I'm going to click on my file here, which is just project 1. And the first step that you want to do is you want to create a module. I'm going to click on that. Essentially, a module is a container for macros. So a single can contain multiple macros. It can contain multiple modules. So a module gives you a way to organize things. And let's just call this Hello World. And when I create the module, I then have to specify which language I want to use. And like I said, C#, VB.NET, Ruby, or Python. In this case, I'm going to use VB.NET. And then if I want to, I can type a description of what this module is. So I click OK. And Revit's going to go through the steps, and it's going to essentially open up Sharp Develop. And like I said, Sharp Develop is the programming environment for creating macros in Revit, and it's built into the software. So you can't access it directly without going through Revit. And it's coming up here in a second. Okay. So here's the Sharp Develop interface. Let me just minimize that. So I've created my module, and now I can click on the macro button here, and I can create the actual macro. And let's call it hello world. Again, I can write a description if I want. One thing to note, when you're writing macro names or module names, you can't have spaces or special characters. It'll give you an error. So I click OK, and you can see it created a drop down here. And then here's my macro. So if I switch over to Sharp Develop, let me just zoom in here on the code, you can see that it actually created my Hello World macro. And every language is a little bit different, but in VB.NET, your code is always going to be wrapped as a subroutine. So it's public sub Hello World. So that's defining my macro. So the code that I want to write, I'm just going to add that in between that open and close line. So if we wanted to make a very simple macro, I'm just going to type task dialog.show. And I'm just going to give the thing, I'm just going to create a dialog box that pops up and says something. It's like the most basic programming example there is. And let's say, hello world. And then you'll notice I have a lot of quotes. I have a lot of open and close parentheses. And that's essentially the command that I'm going to run. And what it is doing is it's saying create a task dialog, then show it, give it a title, which I'm calling test, and then separated by the comma here, that's the text that it's going to display in the dialog box. Now, once I've written my macro, I actually need to compile it. And this is the step that will translate my VB.NET code into what's called the runtime code. And Revit then runs the runtime code. So I just go up to build solution. And you can see down here towards the bottom of the screen, I have a couple of tabs. Here I have an output tab, I have an errors tab. If I had an error, it would have shown up here as part of the building process. So for example, if I'm missing a parenthesis and I go to build, and you can see it's telling me that there's a parenthesis expected. So it saw the error and then it alerted me to it. So now if I go back, build solution, in the lower left-hand corner, it says build finished successfully, and then I don't see anything listed in the errors window. So now I can go back into Revit, and I can click on my macro, and then I click the run button, and there's my hello world. So again, that's like the most basic programming example, but it gives you a sense of how you access the macro editor. You know, that's, again, very simple command to display the dialog box. But the process of building the macro, checking for errors, fixing the errors, and then running the macro, that's essentially that's the same process, regardless if you're doing something that's very simple like this, or if you're going to do something, that's a lot more complex. And I'll show you a couple examples of some of the macros that I've written. And again, these are available for download on ArchSmarter. Let's see, let's find a good one. So the sheet maker macro, let me open up. Essentially what this does is it will create a series of sheets in your Revit project file based on data that's in a spreadsheet. So let me open up Excel. I have a very simple spreadsheet. Open this up, and you can see here there's just 3 columns, and I have a column of sheet numbers, I have a column of sheet names, and then my third column is a list of views. So I can take this data, and then through my macro, I can use this to generate sheets in Revit, and then I can also add views to the sheets. So I'm just going to run this real quick, and again, I need to switch to that RVT file, and I'm going to click on Make Sheets. and I click Run, you can see that as part of the macro, I built into it a dialog box. So the dialog box is prompting me to select a file, a CSV file. You can actually write macros that accept Excel files, but it's always a little bit more complex working with Excel. I personally like CSV because it's just a regular text file. So I'm going to click Open, and then I can specify which title block I want to use, and then I just click the Make Sheets button. So now the dialog box is telling me here that it created the sheets and then it added the views. So I go on to close and we can see what it did. So now these sheets weren't here previously. If I click on them, here is my sheet that corresponds to the Excel file, and then there's the view that got added onto it. And I found that good things that are good candidates for macros are typically tasks that are repetitive, that are tedious, and that you have to do like more than 3 or 4 times. So a macro that creates sheets is a good candidate because, excuse me, it's not that it's very difficult to create sheets in Revit. I mean, it's really easy. But if you had to create 200 sheets or or 300, you wouldn't want to be clicking the mouse for like 2 hours. I mean, at least I wouldn't. So if I can make a spreadsheet that lists the information that I need, and then I can have Revit do the the grunt work essentially, it's going to do 2 things. It's going to do it a lot faster than I would do it manually, and then it's also going to do it a lot more accurately. Because I know if I had to copy names and copy sheet names and position views, like I'm not going to do it as accurately as a macro is. So again, those kind of tedious tasks work out great. Let me show you. I have another macro, which is called Walls from Lines. And this macro, I just have some very simple model lines here. These are actually imported from a DWG file. And I'm going to run this real quick. And when I run this, I can select my model line style. These are all coming from AutoCAD, and I can choose a base level. And then I can select a specific wall type. So I'm going to say generic 12-inch masonry, and let's make it this wall height 15 feet. Oops. And now I click Create Walls, and what the macro is doing is it's actually generating these walls based on these lines. And let me run that again. And let's do it for the interior wall. Generic 6-inch, and we'll make that 15 feet. And it's creating it again, and let's do one more time for this red line. And I'll choose that. So you can make these macros are maybe a little bit more involved because they have an interface. Typically, in my process, I'll write a macro that I might not necessarily do an interface at first. I will hard code, say, the level or the line style that I want to use, and I'll make it work that way. And that way, if I need to change the values, I'll just enter the code and change them manually. And then over time, once I've made sure that the mechanics or the logic of that macro works, then I'll start embellishing it with a dialog box, or I'll add some additional features to it. So it's kind of it's an iterative process. So let's go exterior glazing. We'll make this 15 feet, and again, I create the walls. So in this example, you can imagine if you had you have a designer who's working in AutoCAD, and they're just doing some real quick outlines of the building, of the walls. You could then import those DWG files into your model, and then you could run this macro, and it would generate those walls, on any model line throughout the entire model. So if you have something that's 5, 10, 15 stories, you could do a rough model very, very quickly. And let me show you one more macro here. This one's called DWG, convert DWG to Revit lines. And essentially, the idea behind this one is if you had some AutoCAD details, for example, that you didn't necessarily want to import into your model because it's going to bring all the extraneous text styles and line styles in. You didn't want to link them because then you have to manage the links. But if you wanted to convert them to actual Revit detail, but you didn't want to redraw it, So let me run this. Let's go. Oops. Convert. So now I can choose, do I want to convert to detail lines or model lines? Say detail lines. I'm going to select the DWG file. Here are my layers. It's reading those from the DWG file, and I can specify a Revit line style for those, or I can leave it blank. So in this case, I'm just going to specify, pick some random walls here. And roof. And then I hit OK. And you can see that basically what it did is it just used the geometry of those DWG lines, and then it recreated that using a Revit line. Now, I'll delete this, and you can see though it doesn't, the API is limited in this aspect, so it won't convert text, AutoCAD text or dimensions, and it will take patterns as the individual elements. So there's always going to be some limitations, but it's fairly straightforward. You can create these complex macros that do a lot of tedious stuff for you fairly automatically. So that was just some quick examples of macros I've created. Let me switch here. I'll just wrap things up. Okay, so if you want some more information, you can go to this website. I made a special website for you today, and this has some resources that you can use and that you can look at if you want more information about macros, if you want to access the library well. And actually, let me just have it up here. And here we go. So these are some posts from ArchSmarter you can take a look at. And here is the macro library, so you can take a look at that and download those macros. And I also wanted to mention on an online class about writing your own Revit macros. The class, it's going to be tutorial based, and I'm working on a pilot version of the class right now, and I hope to launch it publicly probably in September. But essentially, it'll take you through step by step. We're going to create, I think, about 6 or 7 macros from start to finish, and it'll guide you right through that process. So if you're interested in that too, you can sign up for ArchSmarter updates, and you'll get information as I post to the site and also about the class. And that's it from me.
All right, thanks
also,
very
too, if
much.
you have any questions, email me anytime.
No? All right, well, I would recommend visiting his website. Like I said, actually, I think David, you emailed Nate, Nate emailed me, and that's how I got connected. And and I was interested in taking his online class, so hopefully some others could participate, but hopefully your technology works a little bit better. But thank you very much, and thanks for getting the website up and running. We're going to post that on a couple places, and we'll do it on the AIA website as well as our DABUG Facebook and Google page. So we get the word out there, and thanks for taking your time this evening. All right.
Great, thank you.
All right, have a good night. I know you said you had to head out.
So I should give you control, right?
Yep.
Yes, I do. Okay, I'm stopping the screen, and it's all over to you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
All right, have a good one.
I think the wonderful news is now projector.
this thing good to go there, Dustin? Yeah.
Yeah, did you do the screen sharing, Chris?
I don't know. Here, I'll let you take over.
All right, so desktop sharing.
Okay. And then, oh, we're gonna go past you here, Jason. Is that your first one?
No. Oh, yes.
Field research, okay.
All right, so, hello, everyone. Sorry I was late trying to from the meetings. But I am Camille Moretti. I'm an architect and senior planner here in the HPS and Code office. I've been working here for about 8 years, and we promoted using technology and leveraging our time, making smarter rather than harder. The previous talk. So we've been trying to leverage a little bit of technology for our what we're doing with our clients.
I'll work on that.
So the talk would be about field research and parametric analysis. We've been using or providing some of the information that we've learned from actual field research and utilizing some parametric tools to help us analyze our floor plans and give our clients a better understanding of their space. So we'll talk a little bit about the field research and then how we translate it to design and how we've been using the tool. A little bit about the Mac our client is about 1,500,000 employees. It's 12 acute care hospitals in West Ohio and South Michigan. So it's a lot of hospital beds. And we've been working for them for about 2 years now. And we're working on a full patient replacement tower for them for inpatient. It's an inpatient unit. We do mostly healthcare out of this office, so that's why we're here. So their goal is to create this tower that's really bringing the future now, implementing technology to better the workflow, to provide better care for patients, and obviously, trying to lean the workflow that they have now. So we have done a lot of studies on the current state. We did demand forecasting studies on, all of their need in terms of forecasting for the next 10 years. We looked at all of the operations and cost improvement, and also did the research and our started moving to the design. So really, I want to focus a little bit about the data-driven results and more research. So we deployed a research team, which is 2 people, 2.5 days on-site, site tours, photo essays, interviews, and actual shadowing of nurse for 3 shifts. And it was getting a map of sequences. It's not just about distances, it's about sequence of events. So the big aha was getting a lot more, and you really do. So what we think of a simple med event is like the nurse goes to the nurse provides the supply medication, picks up medication, goes to the patient, and then goes back. That's what we think the nurse does. And that's not true. So a real event is nurse goes to the patient room, patient says needs medication, in pain. So nurse goes back to the med room, picks it up, brings it back. Well, I need something to take their medication with. So go back to the nursing room, pick up some applesauce. Go back. Well, I'm kind of nauseous. So I go back to to get some ice for them to drink it during the vacation. But again, still not just makes mitigation for that. This is actually, it actually occurred that way, so that's why it's very interesting to see. So then she went back to the patient grew up. And so she goes to linen, right back new linen to the patient, and then takes the soda linen all the way back to the soda linen. And then she finally goes back to the central nurse station. So that's one event, that's one patient, one medication event. So you can see from what this person was doing, it's a lot of walking. And a lot of it is not necessarily walking. So we did all of that and started to develop a sequence mapper that would not only look at our distances for the key rooms, but the sequence in which we've observed the nurses walking. So first thing, bring a plan of Rhino. It could be either a Revit Explorer or even a PDF. So you just got to scale it right. Then we start to place a room point, which is the entrance location to each of the rooms, and then the room types, so the room names would then reflect back to our grasshopper analysis map. So that's how we kind of set up a quarter line on where the nurses would be walking, usually it's kind of the center of the quarter. And then we bring it to the grasshopper algorithm that's plugged in the Rhino. That was created by our line group. And don't ask me too much about this because I know how to press a button that brings it up and runs the entire thing. So based on the data from the research, we were able to create all of the intricate little interconnections, if this, then that, then this, then that, in Grasshopper. And then it spits out the Excel raw data over there. What that does, it gives us a distance to every single room from the east. It does the adjacency data, so distances to single rooms, and also the mapper gives us a full length of walking to whatever we want to do. So what that allows us to create is a heat map to understand what's too far, what's okay, what's, when we need to change. So we, in talking with the staff, we established the rooms that you have to have closest to you, the rooms that you're going with. So, your nourishment, your cleaning, your soil room. Things like the break room, conference room, those are things you're not going to all the time, so they're okay to be a little farther out. So it would be okay to have the Revit in the first two columns, but to have a Revit in the nourishment room or the animals. And this is that whole walk back to the nourishment room that to get the applesauce. So that tells us this is their current state, that's their existing unit. So we did a study on their existing unit to help inform the design of the new unit. So the nice thing about the mapper is that now we can test any plan and configuration really quickly. It takes about 30 minutes to run a full simulation. So this was, obviously taking the mile or your distance in feet. So nursing room is a big issue because they're going through that a lot. Every time they have to get medication, they have to get medication with something, food. And then the break room is pretty far, but these two were the ones that were the most concerned. So the new unit we designed to take those things into consideration. We ran a bunch of simulations, and every time we changed the configuration of the floor, because the support spaces, patient rooms, on both sides, and the floor is all the support spaces. So we ran the simulation every time we had a new configuration, reviewed it with the staff, ran it again, and reviewed the test how far the nurse would be walking in this kind of unit. So the big thing is that this is the current state. This is the proposed future state. The only reds are really on the break room conference space. So in total walking, they currently do about 3 miles per shift. And on the new design, where at least the test has been almost like 6 miles, so we're almost able to half their walking distance. And that, you know, obviously would translate into more time at bedside, less walking, searching for things that are, you know, should be at bedside, and, you know, better results for patients. So that's really what the whole exercise is about, you know, trying to make it a parametric tool really have concrete results and something that our clients can understand. When I tell them your unit's going to capture walking distance, they understand that. That's a lot more concrete to them than, yeah, it's a lot closer, but yeah, we can actually test it into the data. So that's it in a nutshell. Questions?
When you said you did the tests on the new unit, were you using the same grasshopper?
Yes. So it was, since we're doing everything in Revit, we would even MSC, you know, our first SC, we just block rooms. We ran it, made changes, run it again. I mean, actually through the meetings, the walking increased. Nurses were like, oh, can we make this? So you can go from both sides. And, you know, so going through the process, we ended up getting even better results from the walking. But we tested it every time we made a change to make sure that we weren't creating issues.
Everything I know with backlog and using that for the rest of it, you can put the separate cell into the same as a current.
We have not gotten to that point quite yet. That's something that we can, because the big grasshopper export, you know, the Python and all of the zoo that help with that suite. That they could, I'll definitely ask them to look into that. I haven't gone to that. I've used it some. It spits out enough information for me to handle right now. But that's a great idea. That's something that would be nice.
Is that something that you wrote specifically for this kind of situation, or is that other applications?
We haven't gone to, you know, it's been mostly for the healthcare for unit assessment. We are looking to create another type that's more of a flexibility / utilization rate for clinic spaces. That's where it's in the works, so maybe next time when it's developed, we can talk about that. But for now, that's been all that we're using for education units.
I was just curious, just to say on the retail side, it's almost like the mall to be able to track what's really traffic.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that could definitely be looked at. There are, you know, for what we do, that's like the best application for us. It's really getting into the more of what we do here. I don't see why not. Also, talk about analysis. I know that the Dallas folks use something similar, and along with the stadium evacuation plans and planning for that. I know they use something like that.
This is a corporate question. This is the information the hospital is saying that's made the hospital larger, or the floors larger, because the patients are going to take care of the patients. Disappointing in the degradation versus the hospital could down actually cover.
Well, it's more about it's more from the standpoint of making the nurses more efficient. This is a workforce and nursing role is getting smaller and smaller. They're not, they don't have intake of nursing in the workforce as they have people returning. So they're in a pinch for nurses, for caregivers, kind of across the board. So something that they're looking at is cross-training nurses, doing a lot more nursing assistance, because that's one of the concerns. So anything that we can do to make sure that nurses thinking it's not spending time doing things that she shouldn't be doing, she shouldn't be doing, it will help their in staff. But to your point, it could be that, once that's quantified, it's more about, the way that they're getting reimbursed now has a lot to do with HCAP scores, which is, maybe this is getting too deep into it, but they have, it's a perceived level of quality that's really patient kind of rating, how clean was your room, how responsible your nurse, and all of that. So a portion of their reimbursement has to do with perception. So if they can make the perception of the nurse being there more often, the nurse coming back faster to attend to something that I'm asking, then that the HCAP scores go up, their reimbursement goes up, so profitability goes up. So it's a little more complex, but yeah, it's just getting nurses at the bedside is really the critical thing. Any more questions? Okay, more to that.
Not at all. I think that's like the most concrete example we've had yet of any kind of grasshopper or dynamo thing to date. It's been really abstract until this point about, sun shading and things, and like this is this is raw data, which is awesome. Okay.
This is something that we've been very, something that the client really sees the value.
Did you bring this idea to the client, or did they ask you to study this, and this is the tool you developed?
We have a group of research, so we found a first client that is, up for that kind of thing. So we did the first research project with them kind of on our time, and then we've already done the second one that they paid for.
Great, yeah.
So, there's a research deliverable, and then they're doing that to be formed of the design, which for them, to be able to say, yes, we're doing this based on data.
Sure, yeah.
It's, a great thing, a great tool for them to kind of sell the market.
Sure. Terrific.
Oh, yeah, it's a quick deployable research piece that our head researcher, she's fantastic. I mean, it's doing awesome things, and we, it's quick and very effective. It's like walking through with the lens of a researcher is very different than any of us walking space. She nails it. Where what's going forward. She sees patterns that regular people have. Even the nursing. Like, we actually do that. It's great. Maybe we should not do that. Yes. So we had a lot of the questionnaires, and we had I think where we learned most was the shadowing. And we had done process improvement like current state mapping, where they describe their process, and then they observe their process, and they had this idea of what their process was in their head, and that really didn't match. So some of it found some discrepancies where they thought their process was, even the owners that do it, and things that they didn't realize they were working around issues. If they say nurses are, it's the good, bad, and the workaround. They are great at adapting, you're not perfect. They adapt to anything else. So they'll make you what they have. It's very interesting how their culture of adapting creates some things that we really expect.
So some structures that maybe are not the most efficient, by design.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, that's why it was very important to get the research involved and, you know, we learned a lot of things, but they were easy, quick fixes, like the whole nourishment needs so far. All they need to do is move applesauce into the measure. That's all. That was a lot of the walk-in.
Amazing.
So that was one of the big findings. That's why it was meant to real applesauce. We joked around with the applesauce mountain. Like the
And the price of applesauce goes up when Pfizer gets a hold of this information.
yeah, I know. So that, I mean, that has been very helpful for us. The client has been very happy with it. So.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you, Camila.
Thank you so much.
Sure. All right. Could you maybe like tell people like where the restroom is? So give it a 5-minute break. I'm going to try and make the headset work. So just take 5 and.
Restroom is right up this door to the right to the left, about 20 feet.
Perfect. Great. So easy. So please take a minute if you need, refill your drink, whatever. And I'm going to try and make technology work for us. Hopefully to take the place of that microphone. Hello. Internal microphone. Disable. Stephen, could you please go over to the chat window? Okay, not sure. When did you type that? Everything is good on my end. Chat. All right, configure. Set up microphone, headset microphone. Next. After reading this, you can proceed to the next page. Read the following sentence aloud in a natural speaking voice. Peter dictates to his computer. He prefers it to typing and particularly prefers it to pen and paper. Okay, Stephen, can you hear me? Unmute a single attendee. Unmute. Stephen, are you there? I'm just wondering if you can hear me. Stephen, are you there? Well, I can't really hear you. Not sure if you're saying anything or not. Could you try one more time, Stephen? Thank you. Cheers. It says power. I don't know how to tell if it's up or down. Okay. All right. Boy, I'm not getting any response from Stephen here. Unfortunately, I don't know if the audio is recording into the system, but I think it is based on seeing this right here. So what I'll do is I'll hand it to you next. Are you good with that? All right, cool. So we're going to return to, oh, we still have screen sharing. Oh, Andy's gone. One online, one unmuted. Okay, well, that's unfortunate. Right. Reduce risk.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, sure. There you go. That one? Resume. It says resume right here. I don't know what that means. This new Windows 10 stuff is certainly not my favorite. Oh, but I'm not sure where you are in here. Exactly. Oh, for Pete's sake, come on, really? I thought you could right click and go to all the slides and like pick from one. Is that not the case? Yeah. There you go, perfect. I'm gonna refill my drink. Thanks, sir. Just toss that on.
Not sure. Do I have to have it? Yes, please. Okay. Unless you talk about the microphone with your face, but. Okay.
Mr. Jason Hassel.
You ready to go?
Give us all the best updates. Big changes coming up. Good stuff.
Thank you, Dustin. All right, so again, my name is Jason Hassel from Imaginet Technologies, a RAND worldwide company. And I'd like to take an opportunity to, well, throughout the past few months, we've talked about desktop subscription, Autodesk's migration to a new licensing model, desktop subscription. Traditionally, virtually everyone in this room and perhaps our audience outside of the room are familiar with perpetual licensing, standalone and network licensing. So really this is just, there's two goals I have with this PowerPoint, and that is just common uses where you may see desktop subscription make sense for your business, and then just a brief comparison between perpetual licensing versus desktop subscription. All right. So companies face a number of challenges when it comes to budgeting for software. You know, figuring out how to manage your finances, creating solutions that allow you to ramp up or scale down, exploring ways to stay competitive, and examining ways to reduce risk. With so many needs competing for your time and resources, it's important to find a flexible solution that can help you address any or all of these issues. Staffing needs, regardless of business size, it's important to manage your finances. So software shouldn't leave you cash strapped. You now have an option to eliminate the large upfront investment traditionally associated with perpetual licensing. And now you can allocate funds across multiple areas of your business with freed up capital. Staffing needs change. You know, we have seasonal workers like interns or contractors that come into the business. There may be times when you have a project-specific or client-specific demand that necessitates the use for specialized software. Both of these realities require you to be flexible and responsive. So short-term licenses with the ability to reassign those licenses allow you to maintain that flexibility. Under the traditional software system, you can easily get stuck with outdated software. Long-term contracts or outright purchases might leave you with seats that aren't being used. You can reduce the risk of throwing away money by paying only for the software you need and for the time in which you need it. Software features constantly change. Don't lose business because you don't have access to the capabilities needed to secure work from a potential client. You invest in software solutions that allow you to stay current and always have access to the latest tools. Autodesk took the previously mentioned concerns into consideration and created a software solution aimed specifically at addressing these issues. Desktop subscription is a flexible, cost-effective way to access the latest Autodesk software via monthly, quarter, annual, and multi-year term licenses. These term licenses provide the flexibility needed to create software solutions that work for companies of all sizes and budgets. You have more choices with desktop subscription, and there's really 4 ways that allow you to purchase the software and based on your budget and the type of work you do. There's monthly desktop subscription. It's really great for freelancers, startups, very small businesses that only need access to Autodesk software when working on a short project. Being that monthly desktop subscription requires the lowest upfront investment as well, and so that provides you a lot of flexibility. There's a quarterly desktop option as well for more established companies, large and small. Oftentimes these types of companies experience seasonal workflow, temporary staff hires, ad hoc projects, etc. Quarterly desktop subscription allows you to easily ramp up or scale back. Annual desktop subscriptions are more appropriate for companies that need longer-term access. Larger companies that are working on complex, ongoing projects may find annual desktop subscriptions helpful when they need access to specialized software to get the job done. Also, very small businesses who have seen their project pipelines become more stable and predictable, yet remain cautious about large expenditures, may also find this to be more budget-friendly option as opposed to purchasing a license outright. The multi-year desktop subscription is for more established companies with a predictable project workload over a long period of time. The multi-year desktop subscription can save them money, and it allows you to lock in the price for the duration of the contract, unlike with maintenance subscription, which can change. Desktop subscription has many licensing rights. Many of you are familiar with the entitlements that come with your perpetual licenses through maintenance subscription. Desktop subscription is no different. There's a number of things that are similar in terms of the entitlements that you receive with desktop subscription, but there's really actually two that I'd like to touch on. With desktop subscription licenses, you can install it on multiple machines. As long as you have your user ID and your password to Autodesk account, as long as that software is installed on that machine, you can use the software. So it gives you a little more flexibility in terms of where the software is installed. And probably the biggest difference between perpetual and desktop subscription is the global licensing rights. As you may know, if you buy a perpetual license here in the United States, the ability to use that license outside of the country, you're not able to do it. You're only supposed to use your perpetual license within the geography where it's purchased. This is the biggest difference because with desktop subscription, you can buy an AutoCAD license here in the US and use it virtually anywhere in the world. So that's a pretty big, significant change in Autodesk policies. All right, previous version rights, things of that nature are all still available to you with desktop subscription. Cloud services, 25 gigabytes of space. You get the introductory cloud credits as a named user to a desktop license. Many of you are familiar with cloud rendering. You get that initial 100 cloud credits when you acquire a desktop subscription license, very similar to perpetual. With support, it's one price. When you buy perpetual licenses, your traditional licensing, it's the cost of the license plus the maintenance subscription. It's a second line on a quote. With desktop subscription, it's one cost. So the cost of the license and the type of support you want, either basic support, which is the same as email support that you have today. You can also acquire advanced support as well, which gives you access to phone support. In this next slide, I want to take a quick opportunity to do just a brief cost analysis between the more popular packages that many of you may be used to. The first one I chosen was AutoCAD, just vanilla AutoCAD. All right, so in this graph, I know it may be kind of hard to see, but there's really two areas that we're going to focus on. The first one on the left, the graph here on the left, and then the graph here second from the right. The one on the left represents the purchase of an AutoCAD license, a standalone perpetual AutoCAD license with 3 years of maintenance subscription. Comparatively, over here, you have a desktop subscription license purchased over a 3-year term. If you can see that amount, I actually have to go in here a little bit. So $5,830 for the perpetual license with 3 years of maintenance subscription versus the 3-year desktop subscription license at $5,040. You can see there's a pretty significant delta in cost in that 3-year term, where desktop subscription has a lower financial impact on your business. So when we're looking at the terms, the first 1 to 3 years, it can make a lot of sense to acquire a desktop subscription. Beyond 3 years, perpetual licensing has the financial advantage because you're renewing subscription on your license versus purchasing that term all over again for 3 years. In the second example is Building Design Suite Premium. And again, we're going to focus on the bar here on the left and the blue bar graph second from the right. So small. And the one on the left here, what that represents is the purchase. Again, this is a 3-year term. You're acquiring a standalone Building Design Suite Premium license with 36 months of maintenance subscription, this graph here on the left. Your total investment there is $9,900. That's the license, the standalone license, and 3 years of maintenance subscription. Compared to the desktop subscription model for Building Design Suite Premium at $81.90. So you can see there's a pretty significant delta for this technology, and it makes sense. Again, desktop subscription is a lower entry, and that first 3-year period, it makes sense to look at the desktop subscription option. Again, beyond 3 years, the perpetual license may have the financial advantage. So we would need to look at both of those, long-term versus short-term. So that's really about all I had. I just had one more thing to say, and that is Autodesk announced the future availability of network desktop subscription licenses on or around February of 2016. Desktop subscription licenses today are purely named user licenses. So it's pretty interesting to hear Autodesk forecast the availability of a future product. But network desktop subscription is coming to a theater near you in 2016. That's all I had.
Great, thank you, Jason. So it sounded like a lower cost of entry for desktop if you're planning on less than 3 years.
Yes.
And also more by usage.
Yeah.
Those were two big highlights that I picked up there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So, Chris, am I next or are you next? I'll go next. All right. So, I think I've got the audio going through the headset right there. So,
Hey, Chris.
All right, so, okay, here. How many people have heard about FormIT? How many people that use FormIT? Okay, so I just wanted to press the play. I'm going to play the guy right here. we're gonna do a brief overview if you want to. You can check out the app. I unfortunately got busy with life and didn't get too much involved into it, but I just still want to present it so that people have seen it and can. No, my kitchen isn't done yet. So I switched. Whoa, what is this? This is too fancy. What the heck is this? Hey. How do you get rid of all this? Yeah.
Sorry, we covered the front of the end. Scroll down. FormIT. Any of those look familiar? Look down here.
This is too fancy here. There you go. Oh, look at that. All right. Well, I'm just going to go to the website. All right. So, this is the website here, FormIT 360. You can just Google it if you want. It's actually a pretty user-friendly website. Oh, that's great. Why is it not coming through? Yeah. What did you do?
Go ahead and click on this part, this PowerPoint right there.
Which one?
That one.
That one?
Yeah, slideshow. Sorry, try that one. No? How about up here? Resume slideshow.
I just want to share the screen.
Yep, go to the green one. And then, no, you are screen sharing right now. That's weird. The projector's not synced anymore. Why don't you cancel out a PowerPoint entirely? That thing's stupid. It's Microsoft. Now we've got blue. Hold on, is it stretching? Is it spanning two screens? Can you try slide it? Oh.
Yeah. There we go. All right. Sweet. Anyways, man, we're just hitting like all kinds of angles tonight, aren't we? Thought we were. All right. So here's the website. You can just Google FormIT, Autodesk FormIT. It's actually a pretty user-friendly website. And I'm going to jump. There's, I guess, a couple parts to it. They have basically a FormIT 360, Cloud 360. The idea is that you store these sketches up in the cloud, and you can use your phone, iPad, the computer, any user face you can probably dream of, and basically it's like SketchUp. If you have one of the iPads, you can start drawing some stuff, or you can go to their online version and basically do the same thing. It has the same environment. As of now, because there's like your Autodesk account, I found that it's really not your Autodesk account if you have one already set up. It's really a separate one. So you have to kind of register your FormIT cloud account as well. But once you get it registered, you can hop on a computer and do a few things with it. And I'll show you a couple things, but like I said, I haven't had a chance to really get too involved with it. And you can probably Google some videos. I saw some videos the other day that, you know, they're a couple-minute videos, just how-tos, you know, here or there. And then the other part that I'll show is the Revit side is, so once you have your model, you can download it and bring it into Revit. Probably should have done that while this thing's loading, but So when you get online, it's basically the same environment that you have on the iPad or whatever tablet that you're using. There's a couple little things that differ as far as, you know, you're using your finger versus using a mouse. So it does get a little used to getting a little time to get used to. The one thing I wish they would have included as of now is, you know, the simplest extrude command, wherein, you know, if you ever used like Vasari, you could draw like a square, or any time you're doing a map, you know, an in-place element, you draw a line and extrude it. Well, I haven't found that feature yet on this, but hopefully they'll get there. The other thing that you can do is you can bring in a Google Maps. Hopefully they won't do that. So, you know, if you have a site and you want to start there, getting close. All right, close enough. You can bring in a satellite image, and you can bring in this image similar to what you could do in Vasari before. The one caveat that you can't do is when you have set it all up in FormIT and you bring that model into Revit, it doesn't bring the image. It just brings the mass elements. So I said, well, that might be a feature that would be cool to bring in so they can continue development in Revit, but we'll see. So once you get your you know, your map in there, I'm sorry, I'm not connected, it may not load. There's just editing tools, some preset masses. There's some, you know, joins, sweeps, some more complex geometry creations. The Pro version has solar analysis that you can bring in, but you can still do shading studies if you want to based on the site. There's, in this area, I haven't figured out the floor area and the gross area yet and how it works in conjunction. There's materials that you can use. You can create levels in this file as well. And then there's this content library, which this is one definitely part I haven't looked into, but you're able to take, like, let's say you have a chair in Revit, a Revit component, and bring it into this view, use it, and then when you link it back into Revit, it's a native Revit component. So you don't get like a SketchUp model of something. So earlier in the day, I tried linking a library. It's just taking some time. This is hooked up to, again, your online account, so you have to have an account registered. And you know, the bigger question is if you have a big company and you have, you know, several people using this, that'd be kind of the next step, is how do you have like a central repository for people to use materials and different components. So once you, you know, there's, I don't know what that one is, but, ooh, Jetpack. But, you know, it's just like any other 3D, you know, you can spin around the model. And then once you have elements placed, you know, depending on if you're using the touchpad, you know, you have to tap an edge and you can extrude edges. Oops, you can enter lengths. The faces, if I can grab here, again, you know, you can extrude. So once you can, you know, once you start manipulating stuff, you can basically, the idea was, I think, take what SketchUp has and kind of create something that's a little more user-friendly. So that's really the environment. Once you get this mask, you can save it. And in Revit, if you go to the website, there is a download section right here. And that is the converter. And unfortunately, it starts at 2015. So If you're in 2014, you won't be able to use it. But this converter is a add-in that comes here, and you can convert. This is the RFA to FormIT content, so that's like taking your own families and pushing it back into the FormIT environment. And then you can convert a sketch that you did in 360. And the other thing, which I haven't tried yet, is you can take SketchUp models, and you're supposed to be able to convert it into a FormIT model. So again, when you bring a model in, it's not linked to your cloud folder, so you literally have to download it locally and then convert it, and it's as easy as opening a file, and then your mass is there. I don't have it available right now, but it's pretty easy to bring a file in. Like I said, the only problem is you can't see any maps that you brought in. So again, really short presentation. I'm sorry I didn't have more on it, but I thought this came out maybe 2 months ago, and it seems like a pretty cool app for 2 months old. Still probably has a long way to go, but if you can get some early sketches going, massing sketches, design sketches going that are native to Revit, helps out the long term of the project. And I don't know where the iPads went, but feel free to check it out if you don't, or if you have a pad yourself, download it. It's free. All right, that's all I got. Go back to this. Any questions? Yes. So the first time I used it was on my phone, but even though this is a pretty large phone, it's still kind of hard to get all the option screens. So I got a larger Samsung tablet at home, and probably I would say it's more of a tablet than a phone app, just because it's sometimes difficult to click all the options, and then you're trying to, especially if you got bad hands like me, sometimes hard to select edges, whereas that gives you a little more access to space. All right. The other thing, which I did, they do have a forum online that you can ask questions, and I posted something, and within like 2 hours, the developers posted on it a reply. So, I think that Autodesk is really looking to support it and make it grow. So, the more people that can break it and share ideas, I'm sure it'll become a mainstay.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Only when you're finished.
Okay, I'm finished.
All right, then. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So, does anybody help me remember? Is this Autodesk's second or third try at like a model, like a schematic design app? Does anybody remember that thing where you had like back 10 years ago when the Wacom tablets first came out with the pens, and you'd pull over the trace paper and sketch on that, and then that thing died, and then they had their first chance to buy SketchUp and they didn't, and then there was something else before this. What was that one called? I don't remember. Yeah, that one died. Then they had the second chance to buy SketchUp, and then the survey people bought it. Who's that? Trimble. Thank you. Yep, they bought it. Now we're doing it again. It's hard. There's a reason I'm not in management. All right. So, weren't able to get Revit 2016 loaded onto this computer, so we get to end the night with an awesome PowerPoint on my favorite Revit 2016 new features. And I'm going to keep it short and sweet so that we can all be out of here and still get our 2 AIA CEUs. All right. Thanks, Chris. All right, so there are still a handful of core features that will benefit everybody in Revit, meaning the structural, us MEP people, and architects. All right, so I tried to break out for like general and performance and then into actual picks and clicks kind of commands. So let's see, allow, the ones I put in red I thought were the most important. Allow navigation during redraw. So to improve performance when navigating a view, use this new option to interrupt the display of model elements as you move through the model. Okay, everybody knows that Revit pans and zooms slow. Hopefully that gets a lot better in 2016. And there's that's an option, and I think it enables itself by default. But as you guys know, when you roll out a new version of Revit, a lot of times you have the habit to go and steal your old Revit INI file from the previous release because it has all the settings you want in it. Okay, don't do that for 2016. That's bad because they've got new options in there. You won't get them if you do that. They've also got discontinued. They've discontinued a couple settings, so you could nuke your INI if you try and copy an old one. Rotate project north. I guess there was a problem with that before. Open sheet view. That one's kind of a neat one. You can see if you're in the project browser and you have a view that's placed onto a sheet, you can simply right-click on that view, and it'll take you to the sheet that it's on. All right. So it's a minor thing, but it's handy. Anytime you can reduce the amount of scrolling through that project browser, especially on the big jobs, you'll appreciate that. Okay, next. All right, now getting into probably my two favorite Revit 2016 enhancements right here. The improvements to revisions are tremendous. So if you've ever done a project where your revisions aren't perfectly in numerical order, which is all of them, you'll know that the
sharing desktop, share monitor 2. Okay, good stuff. And I'm recording. Off we go. All right, we'll continue on. So, like I was saying, with revisions, we now have the ability to do an alphanumeric sequence. The way you should interpret that is we have the ability to use any sequence you want. All right, so you can go from addendum 4 to addendum 7 to RFI 29 to additional service request 15 and have all of those revision tags be able to tag the number defined in this sequence instead of having to make dummy tags or use one of the other fields as a substitute, like the issue by, that a lot of people used it for. Okay, so that's one thing that's really handy with revisions. Yeah. I personally have not. Anybody else? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Give that a try. Yeah, I don't know if that would fix. So you're saying it would actually change the bubbles, but not the revision table? Because the bubbles are linked back to that dialog box, but the table never refreshed itself. I wonder if you... Sorry, not the dialogs. I meant the revision legend in the title block. Did you try editing the family and reloading it? Mm-hmm. Oh. Well, if it was right on the sheet, that's all that matters at the end of the day. Declare victory and walk away. Okay, so the other thing that I didn't get in the screen cap here is that actually drawing revision clouds, I think, I don't know if this happened in 15 or 16, but you can draw revision clouds as a rectangle now, and you can draw them as line segments. It still chases it with that goofy, curved, rabbit hopping kind of line type, but it actually works more like a polyline in AutoCAD, like an AutoCAD polyline, which, thank God, finally. I mean, that was a really horrible way of having to draw revision clouds. So that's gotten a lot better too, and we have the ability to control the size of those arcs of the revision cloud also in the revisions dialog box. The dialog box one level higher than this. So that's all if you go into, it's in view. Yeah, it's in view revisions is where that dialog box lives that you can get to this guy and the size of the clouds. And then, does anybody use Coin's auto section box? No, it's a third-party app for Revit where you just select a couple of elements and you click a button and it generates a 3D view with the extents of that 3D view at the whatever you've picked. It's really handy for engineers because you've got sheet metal guys running this way and they say, oh, there's a pipe there. They can just pick those two elements and hit a button and it pops up a 3D view with just that area, so you can see what's colliding with what. As I say, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So Autodesk stole that idea for Revit 2016 and made a button for it. Okay, next up, filters. Changing behavior when filtering. So sometimes with Revit, to get things to display the way you want, you have to use double negatives with the filters. Like you have to say uncheck and does not equal. So getting into the filters the deeper you dig, the further down the rabbit hole you go. So they've changed the behavior of how blank fields work in the filtering. Okay, so if you say display if the field is blank. Well, it used to be if you ever input a 0 there, it could never be blank again. All right, so now they've made it so the value can be nil, which is different than 0. The Revit INI setting, optimize view performance. That's what I was talking about earlier. That was in there earlier. And now the file upgrade dialog. Anytime if you open a project of a previous release, it tells you what release it's coming from and what release it's going to. Kind of handy. Also, if you load families, it'll do the same thing. So anytime Revit goes into its automatic project or family upgrade sequence, it tells you what release it's coming to and from. And if you let your libraries get too old and stale, Revit won't update correctly. Like I had a bunch of my note blocks not update correctly from a Revit 12 library. So you got to go in and check your schedules and things of that nature. Rolling on, 6 minutes to go. Architectural features. So for you architects in the room, IFC links. There's a lot of IFC support in Revit 2016. So you can link in an IFC model. So if you've got some other design firm that's using, something that's not Revit, you can actually, there's ArchiCAD, that's a good one, or I don't know if Triform or whatever the Bentley solution is these days, if that can export IFC or not. But so any kind of third-party architectural solid modeling software should be going towards IFC as the standard exchange format. I don't do a lot of architectural stuff anymore, so I'll let you guys read some of these bullet points. Place rooms automatically. We've been able to place spaces automatically for a long time in Revit MEP, so I guess they finally decided to bestow the tool for you guys using rooms. Rendering. Let's see. This is kind of neat. I did an example of this. The Autodesk has added their own ray tracer, so you don't have to use the NVIDIA Mental Ray only. They've given their own, and I think I have an example right there. Yeah. So this is using the Autodesk ray tracer, just default settings, only changing it to high resolution, and the Mental Ray. So I don't know. I think the Autodesk one looks a little bit better on the copper pipe, but maybe a little not so nice on the I don't know, galvanized or whatever that was, stainless maybe. Yeah. Okay. Oh, that is in. You have to actually. How do I go back? Previous. previous. You actually have to go into the render dialog for that. It's not in the view control settings at the bottom. You actually have to find the render tool to get to that. Energy analysis for Autodesk Revit. There's a new analysis mode. Supposedly, it allows for a more detailed analysis of the building. I have not done this myself yet. It apparently can use conceptual masses and building elements. So maybe that's trying to say if you've got the skin of the building defined in some areas, but just masses in others, it can still do a modestly accurate analysis on that. Us MEP engineers, we tend to do the energy analysis a lot further down the project development cycle than what you guys do as architects. So we don't have a lot of experience using conceptual masses for energy analysis. MEP features, we can now, sorry, I couldn't even say it with a straight face. We can now do flow in liters per minute. Okay, but performance and volume settings. So it used to be a lot of engineers, things don't print right if we actually draw our pipes 4 inches apart from each other. You just get a huge ink blob. So we draw somewhat diagrammatically, the way we always have with 2D lines. And but the way Revit would work is if you would stretch a pipe, even if it wasn't connected to anything downstream, it would still always calculate the entire system volume the second you made a modification to that pipe. Well, the system volume is useless if you're drawing diagrammatically, right? We don't care about that. So they've given us the ability to turn that off, which is going to reduce horsepower CPU cycles, which is going to give you better performance. So that's a good thing. They kind of finally realized that not everybody is shooting for a level 400, 500 BIM design model. Okay, improve snapping behavior. They made it snap better. I don't know what more to say about that. MEP fabrication detailing. This is kind of an interesting one. They bought the TSI software people out of Texas, was it? About a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. So they're starting to bake in the ability to use level of development 400 content from this TSI library in Revit and to be able to export back and forth. It's really hard to draw with. If you go up and watch videos on YouTube, you're basically placing individual components. Like here's a 5-foot section of duct. Here's another 5-foot section of duct. Click, 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 click right down the line. Whereas, so it's not very fluid. It's not a design software. It's actually for creating, cut sheet type parts and exporting to cutting tools. But it is a step down the path of a true virtual building as opposed to a design BIM versus a fabrication and construction BIM. So we need to keep our eye on that. All right. Do we have any structural people in the room? Kevin? No? All right. There's about 3 or 4 pages of structural improvements. We're going to go ahead and make the PowerPoint available to everybody. I think if you get my drift. Display performance. It goes faster. Okay. Really? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. That's good to hear. We upgraded a bunch of our projects from 14 to 16, and one of them was a fairly good sized model. I mean, it was probably half a gig worth of data with all the architecture and structure in MEP, and it did seem to interact a lot faster, just more smoothly, more pleasant to work with. And 14 was a pretty good release too. So going from 14 to 16, it was still noticeable, the improvements. So yeah, they're going the right direction, definitely. Okay, so that's, looking at it, it's 8 o'clock exactly. Did you see that, Chris? Okay, did you want this part or me?
Okay. Actually, I was going to do a quiz so I can get rid of this other plug.
All right, so I did want to show one other quick thing here. But in the meantime, you can look and see when our next meetings are. So this is the AIA Detroit webpage, and if we go under committees, technology and architectural practice, under recorded programs, this is where our past presentations are and where tonight's presentation will be. So this just got populated a couple weeks ago, and looking forward to many more on there. Additionally, we do have our objectives and our next meeting down here. And then the technical resources page, which last time we talked about. This has all kinds of software. You can run filters on it. If you know of any software that you want to add, or even, let's see, I think there's some blogs that I've added. Probably should add that ArchSmarter blog to this. But if you have any ideas on what we want to add to this, please feel free to share with us. And you can email aiadetroittab@gmail.com. If you would wish to host an event or present a topic, we're looking to develop our 2016 schedule now. And as you can see, we have one scheduled for 2016, but we'll need a few more. So, great. Thanks. Okay, January 13th. So that's about it. Just want to give Dave a thank you. Where'd you go, Dave? Thank you very much for hosting, and for HKS for hosting. And I think that's about it. Anything else?
Okay, quick survey. Here is a member of the AIA. Okay, great. Everybody else put your hands up then. So, who's got an email from the AIA with notification for tonight's event? Okay, so even people that aren't AIA members got the email from Lauren or from this general?
This from
Okay, that. Right. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
everyone sign this?
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm just trying to make sure that our communications are getting out in a useful time and fashion, so thank you for that. And yeah, please sign the sign-in sheet, especially the RAA and CEUs. So, yeah, we'll get those. And thanks for attending, and we'll see you in September.
Yes. Yeah, that's everyone. So it's just, I know I kind of went quick, but it's aiadetroit.com. And then when you get there, it's, that'll be the home page, and then under committees, that's our technology and architectural practice page. So, okay. Right, pause.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Pause sharing.
Nope, stop screen sharing. And then now we need to end the meeting. And then, what does it say? Yes, end the meeting.